I want to welcome everyone to Business Planning the Easier Way. We have Mark Lowenstein today from the SCORE Cape Cod chapter, and we have Jim assisting him from Cape Cod as well. And we also have our sponsor today, which is East Cambridge Savings Bank, and we have Debbie Dobbins from there as well. Unfortunately, I don't have her screen or her little title up there on our screen, but she's going to go ahead and talk about East Cambridge Savings Banks really quick for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Teresa. Yes, so I'm a Senior Vice President in Commercial Lending, and I just wanted to give you a few facts about East Cambridge Savings Bank. We were first established in 1854, and we've served our customers and communities since then. We now have 12 branches, 13 when the high school is open. We're in Cambridge, obviously, Somerville, Arlington, Belmont, Medford, Waltham, Chelsea, and Maurice, Woburn with the Patriot Bank acquisition. Our total assets are approaching 1.5 billion, and we take great pride in being part of the communities in which we operate, and we spend countless hours volunteering in those communities. As a mutually owned bank, we are able to take a long-term view with our communities, our customers, and also our employees, all who benefit from that kind of structure. We offer excellent customer service and will provide you with a personal contact. So thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Mark and
Jim. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and East Cambridge Savings Bank, Debbie and Johnny will be on at the end, and they'll be able to take any questions you might have on how business plans might relate to the bank, and they'll be available for those questions at the end of our presentation. So I want to first talk a little bit about SCORE real quick. We have two major focuses at SCORE. One is offering trading through webinars and workshops. We do encourage you to watch for our newsletters and check out the website for that information of the next upcoming events. We've got a pretty great schedule lined up for the beginning of this new year. The most important thing that, or at least we feel that we do at SCORE, is our mentoring, and it is free and confidential. We have mentors with all different kinds of experiences, and we work together to assist our clients. Who are our clients? They are people that are thinking about starting a business, people that are in the process of starting that business, or people that are already in their small business and looking to grow or expand or anything, or learning to manage their business better. We're there for all of those folks. A lot of folks ask me, what is a mentoring session like? And do I have to have anything ahead of time? The only thing you need to have before a mentoring session is questions. That's all. Sessions usually for the first time are 30 to 45 minutes, somewhere in that range. And they're going to learn a little bit about you, find out what your goals are, and work with you to create a plan. And as your needs change, they might bring in other mentors, and you might have a team of mentors that are working to assist you to help your business pathway be as easy as possible. So how do you get a mentor? Super, super easy. You can put a note in chat, and I'll make sure the right chapter reaches out to you. You can go to the websites listed here, and I can throw those in chat after my presentation. While you're on those websites looking for a mentor, you might also take a look at the library section. There's a lot of great information, templates, and tools and things for you to use. I definitely highly encourage that. We do have a nice group on today, so we are going to encourage the Q&A tab for questions that you want asked to the presenter today. We will interrupt for some questions during the presentation. Some will have to wait for the end, but if you have a question for our presenter today, we encourage you to put that into Q&A, and we can use chat for everything else. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring down my share and give Mark an opportunity to go ahead and put up his slides. And I'll turn it over to you when you're ready.
All set? Can you see it?
Yes, looks great.
Okay. Hi, everybody. You'll have to excuse me. I may be coughing during the presentation. I'm getting over the tail end of COVID, which I had been able to dodge for almost 3 years, but finally caught up with me. So if I'm coughing, my apologies. So business planning, so it's appropriate that the bank, the Cambridge Savings Bank, the East Cambridge Savings Bank, is the sponsor today because, many times if you're going for a business loan, they'll want a business plan, which of course, hopefully they can discuss a little bit later on. So let's talk about the different ways of doing planning today. So basically, the purpose of a business plan is communicate your story, the story about your business. Two, it can be to employees, investors, or to the bank. Most of the time, I believe that it's going to a bank or investors. Doing a business plan, for any of you who may have done them in the past, it's like doing a big college term paper, a big term paper. It's a lot of work to do it well. So we believe there's other mechanisms that you can use to get the basics done for a lot of things, besides going through the full business plan mechanism. And we're going to talk about that today. Okay, so the main thing we're going to talk about today is this, how we do that. What's a plan? So basically a plan's going to do, where do you want to go? What's your idea? How are you going to get there? And it's essentially to convey the whole story. All right, it is a living instrument in the sense that if you wrote a business plan for an existing business or a business you did a few years ago, I'm sure things need to be changed. So it's not the type of document that gets just put up on a shelf and ignored, okay? It should be updated periodically, maybe once a year for some people, depending on the rate of change of your business. And then you see in the bottom right there a little box, and this is what we're going to talk about that today, is the business model canvas, which is, sorry, there we go, advance the slides. Oh, 2 slides too soon. Anyways, what you want to do is get a template. There's lots of different business plan templates out there. You can get one from SCORE, has them on the website, SEED, SEED.org, which was the slide I think I skipped over. Sorry, I'm not on my regular computer this morning. So what's the business model canvas? It's a tool that was developed maybe 15 years ago by a guy who was writing his PhD in business, a guy named Alexander Osterwalder. He's Swiss, and he wrote this book, which is a big popular planning tool methodology for in the business world. Business models is what we talk about. What's really a business model? It's key pieces of every business has key pieces that are important to deciding whether it's going to be a success or not. All right. So one of the reasons that SCORE, my chapter, and I personally use Business Model Canvas a lot, it's a good preliminary tool that you can then develop a business plan from if you need to do the full plan. And it's a good preliminary tool to filter ideas. It allows you to see what's going on. All right. So this is basically, there's 9 blocks in a business model canvas. And there's 2 key blocks that I believe that you must get right before you worry about the other 7, okay? So the 2 key blocks are customer segments, which is the one on the right, who do you help? And the one in the middle there where it says start here, value proposition, all right? I actually, a lot of people believe that you got to start in the value proposition, but I believe that the value proposition is inextricably tied to each of your customer segments. And that many times each segment of customers, and I'll talk a little more about that, has a separate value proposition. All right. So that's the basic deal. 9 blocks, 2 critical ones at the beginning. If you can't get the 2 critical ones right, everything else isn't worth doing in the rest of the thing. So if you're doing this, take time to do this. By the way, there is a book published on this. You can probably get it. I know you can get it on Amazon. You could probably ask your public library. It's around 20-something bucks on Amazon, called The Business Model Canvas by, again, Osterwalder. All right. It is a great tool to use as a filter. If you're a person who has a couple of different ideas and you're not sure which one you want to start with, it's a good way to filter out the ones and pick out what I call your first choice. So this is a little attempt at just taking an existing business that many of you know of or have used probably, and we filled in without a name on it. So let's go to the customer segment piece. Riders, people who need a ride, and drivers. So these are two different customer segments. It's an interesting way to look at this. For Uber, which is the company that we're talking about here, it's both, there's a customer segment for riders who want to ride and drivers, because if I'm a company like Uber and I don't have enough drivers, I don't have a business here. So this is a perfect example where you have two segments, at least, by the way, and each one is important and each one needs different things. So the value proposition for the drivers is definitely different than the value proposition for the riders, okay? So we will get on and discuss that. All right, so again, the person who put the slides together doesn't agree with me, then they think the value proposition is the most important. But here we go. So what does your customer want? How are you going to solve the customer's problem? So by the way, it's not about you. And this is a really easy trap for people to fall into who are starting a business. You tend to think about it from your perspective. It's really about, why is somebody going to give you money for whatever service or product that you're offering them? What problems are you solving for them? How can you help them make their life better? How can you help them do what they're already doing, but maybe you can do it faster or cheaper? Okay, so it's critical for you to understand what your potential customer wants, what problem they need fixed or solved, or how you can help them. All right. So that's really the key. And again, in many businesses, there's more than one customer segment, and you should have a different value proposition for each one. Sometimes it's an overlap and some of the pieces are repetitive, but it's a different focus. Just like with the Uber, there's both riders and drivers, and those are both critical to making the company work successfully. So this is a slide from the book, and they take a little different approach. And they basically, so on the right, the circle, there's gains and pains, okay? So if your value, the item you're selling or the service can make them do better, more of a gain, or if they've got a problem that needs fixing, it's classified more under a pain, okay? So there's an intricate relationship between how you're solving that. I personally like to just think of it simply as, how am I helping my customer solve their problem? What is their problem, by the way? That's always the key, because a lot of times people think that they're solving a problem that the customer doesn't really care about, which is an important distinction. If the customer really doesn't care about what you think is the problem, you don't really have a business probably. So we're going to take another related type of company to Uber, and we're going to use that to populate it to help you guys hopefully understand some of these blocks here. So the company up here is Waze, all right? And again, related to Uber, but it's a good example of a lot of things. So one of the value proposition is, why do you use Waze? I'm assuming most of you used Waze or Google Maps or a couple other ones out there, but Waze is the dominant one. So again, 7 blocks. Let me just digress for a second, because this is a perfect example, in my opinion, of a company that the business model canvas helps you figure this out, but you're missing 2 critical components that there's nowhere in the business model canvas to talk about. One is something called crowdsourcing, because if you're aware of how Waze actually works, you as a Waze person will put in a notice that's saying there's a car on the road, or there's a police speed trap over there, or that there's a detour. Waze gets all their information by the Waze community, which is an important piece of why Waze is successful. And that's a basic concept called crowdsourcing, which I won't go into a lot of detail on, but it's an important component of why Waze has been successful. Waze was a company started, I think, close to 20 years ago in Israel, by the way, and eventually it's owned by Google. It's been bought by Google maybe several years ago. And they operate on the basic same premise that Google does, where they give a lot of free information out because eventually advertising is driving the way they make money. All right. So why do Waze drivers? What problems does Waze solve for drivers? Well, it helps you beat traffic, get to where you want to go in the most efficient, timely approach. It gives you road warnings. It helps you find gas stations or other things, which of course is where advertisers will advertise. If you're Dunkin' Donuts or other gas stations, they'll advertise on Waze a lot. So now let's focus on the customer segment side of it. Okay, who are the customer segments for different people that use Waze? All right. And again, like most times, there's more than one of them. So who are we creating value for? What types of customers are Waze users? Well, your smartphone user generally. Advertisers. Okay, roadside businesses who want to advertise, that's a segment. Drivers who want to become community. So they call them Wazers. And if you notice when you're using your Waze app, it'll say there's X number of Wazers around. So again, the crowdsourcing is a critical part of Waze's success. It makes the ability to gather that information, because Waze cannot be in Pittsfield or Lowell or Worcester or Hyannis on the Cape or Boston. It depends on people using the app to give information, which then gets shared and promoted to other drivers. So key pieces. Okay. So what are the channels that Waze uses? Well, you get the Waze app through whether you're an Android or an Apple user. Go to the app stores and download it. It's a free app. Okay. So you're reaching out to people, and again, free is a powerful word in any business. Again, we'll talk a little bit later about how if they're giving away the service for free, how do they make money? But basically, what are the channels? How does Waze sell? So for instance, if you're in a retail business, your channels can be either your brick and mortar store, or you could have an Etsy store or an eBay store, or you could be selling on Amazon. So the channels are primarily how are you going to reach your end customer. So for Waze, basically it's an app store. They have a website. They also use social networks. There is a forum on the Waze website where you can, they have, again, this community that they built up. So that's an important thing. How are you getting your communication channels to the customers that you need? So every business is different. And so you need to think about, again, who your customer is, how can you find them, how can you communicate to them, all right? So that's critically important to that. So there's the channels. Waze, free app. It's very easy to use. It works on all the major phone platforms, okay? And advertisers will use them, okay? Awareness and word of mouth, I would doubt that there are many people. At this point, Waze has been around for, like I said, close to 20 years. And Waze is just one of the de facto standards. Interesting enough, Apple Maps came out some number of years ago. It was one of the things that they didn't do as well. And Google Maps and Waze, I believe, have a significant portion of the market share for navigation users. I mean, many of us still have, depending on the age of your car, a built-in, basically what used to be a Garmin or other type of company that had mapping software that was built in when cars were coming out. That was built in. The problem became is that you had to upload your maps and keep them up to date. Where because Waze, Google Maps, and other devices, other app-based navigation systems, the maps are continually being updated, and the data is continually being updated by real time by the community out there. So that had a distinct impact. Most car navigation systems now are just an easy way to plug in your phone so you can see your Waze or Google Maps or whatever other navigation software you're using. So it clearly made a change where built-in navigation systems are not proprietary like they were at one time. This totally disrupted the market at the time. So I say there's two big circles: value proposition and customer segments. Channels is very important also. So one of the things that you do in this business model canvas is you're basically creating hypothesis. I think my customers are the following segments. I identify them this way, or my value proposition. I believe that my value proposition to each one of these customer segments is such. How am I going to reach them? Through this channel, through that channel, through social media, through retail, brick and mortar, whatever, online. So a lot of times at the beginning, you come up with these hypotheses for your business idea. And one of the nice things about the business model canvas is it allows you to try to test them, refine them before you start spending a lot of money and making major commitments of expenses to your business. So the canvas allows you to test a lot of stuff without costing you anything but a little time and energy on the model. And then you want to try to test your hypothesis by talking to customer segments, real people, to see whether they really do like your product, whether they're interested in paying for it. How much will they pay for it? What price point? What kind of pricing mechanisms do I need to offer my product? Again, price is something that's not specifically addressed in the business model canvas, but ultimately all business is a transfer of money for some service or product. So again, the canvas allows you to do a lot of this work without getting to a point where my suggestion is don't go rent a space. Don't go make major commitments to advertising and marketing until you can pretty much be reasonably comfortable that the items that you've put in the business model canvas are realistic and you've got some semblance of being able to believe that they're true. The worst thing you can do when you start a business is basically convince yourself that it's all fine. And then when you go out to launch your business, you find out what you believe was the reality is not what the customer's view of the world is.
Hey, Mark, let me pose a question that came in because I think it's relevant to what you're talking about. Laurent asks, how do I go about doing the market research for pricing, marketing, honing down on the services provided?
Yeah, so again, it's very unlikely that you are offering, Lawrence, that you're offering either product or service that somebody isn't already offering out there. It's funny, I get clients who talk to me because I do mentoring a lot on the Cape and other places. They say, well, nobody else does this. And almost inevitably, that's to me is a major challenge of deciding, I can't believe there's nobody else doing this. So you start Googling around and trying to find out who's doing it. So one is try to find out who your competitors are. And they may not be direct competitors in some cases, but they're related. Start to see how they price. How do they bundle? Do they bundle services? Do they sell it a la carte? Again, so usually you want to find out what competitors are out there, and they don't have to be in your area. It could be that there's nobody in your particular area offering this, Lawrence, but there are people, in Ohio or New Jersey or whatever who are doing it. Learn from them, try to understand what their pricing mechanism is. I mean, one of the tricks that I've done more than once is you try to become what I call a mystery shopper. You call, you have some friend call and ask questions about, the services. Again, if you're new to an industry, that's really super important. If you're already working in the industry and you understand the business and how it works, it's a little less important because we assume that you know this stuff. So hopefully does that help you, Lawrence? And if not, just drop a note to Jim there and, you know, let us know. And if I get done in time, by the way, I'm happy to try to answer some questions live if possible, if we can manage that somehow. All right, so the relationship to the customer segments. All right, so let me keep moving here. Customer relationships, okay. How do we do this? So for instance, what's Waze's, all right? Well, it'll be the next slide, but I'll talk a little bit about it now. It's the community. Basically ads, there's a mechanism, but how do you acquire and retain and grow your customers? So most of you, if you're starting out brand new, you have to expect that whatever you expect in your plan in terms of financials, by the way, because by the way, again, the bank is sponsoring this session. Banks care about the financial statements. And when you're starting out brand new, you're kind of guessing as to what it is. It generally takes longer than you think, unless you happen to have, you know, you've already been in the business and you already have clients that you've had from working at a different company or something like that. Generally, you also have to make sure, and this is a practical financial reason, you need to make sure you have more cash than I think you're going to need for the business, because inevitably something happens that is unexpected. So my general feeling is, if you can afford it, be careful how you spend at the beginning, so you can extend what I call your runway, okay, in there. So customer relationship for Waze, casual users on the app, community support, advertisers. By the way, you know, it's interesting that Waze has, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, they have carpooling. They get money from companies, by the way, who use the app for carpooling within their corporations. So that's another revenue source that we have for Waze that is not obvious to the average person, okay? So what are the key activities that are required? But distribution channels and customer relationships.
Mark, before you go there, there's a follow-up question.
Yep, sure.
Kevin asks, could you recommend maybe 5 quick questions to ask when doing market research? Mostly to keep it short, but also to get as much information as possible.
Sure. So, I mean, so this is a whole nother topic of what I'll call surveying. So when you're asking questions, Kevin, you got to be careful not to ask questions that lead the client or lead the person you're talking to give them the answer you want. So in general, in survey, there are simple questions, which are yes and no. And there are open-ended questions which allow the client. So you want to have kind of a mix of things, because most people, if you're surveying them either on, you know, an online survey mechanism or on social media, or you're doing it face-to-face, talking to people, they don't want to get interrupted too much. So there's a mix of what I'll call yes and no questions. So one is, and you want to be in the right place. So if I was, for instance, selling, I had some auto accessory, maybe I'd want to stand out in front of, you know, AutoZone. And especially if you can show and tell something, that's great. It allows people, because the people who tend to do their own repairs, who buy stuff from AutoZone, like mechanical things generally. Otherwise, they would have brought their car to a dealer. So you may want to have, if you can have a physical device, you could show it to people, they get intrigued, you can start getting them to answer questions. But again, when you're surveying, it's usually a mix of what I'll call short yes or no questions and open-ended questions where you're trying to elicit from them, let them talk, because otherwise, sometimes you survey people and you're driving them in the direction you want them to answer, which you're tending to force the conversation, which may be a mistake in the long run. You don't always know that at the beginning. I don't know if that helped, Kevin, but again, maybe we can talk a little bit afterwards. All right, any other questions, Jim, or I'm gonna move for the moment? Okay. So key activities, how do you operate things successfully? So the key activities for Waze, marketing, and again, what's their real value prop and hidden one? It's this enormous database of mapping and data that they have. So they're taking stuff that you as an individual voluntarily puts into the system because it's kind of a game mechanism. They made it that way. Or I don't usually enter personally, but a lot of times I'll come up with something if I'm using Waze and I'm driving and it says, is the accident still there, or is the police speed trap still there? And there's a yes and no arrow. I'll generally personally try to contribute by saying yes or no. Okay, because then they know whether the activity has changed or moved on. All right. So what are the key activities that you end up doing for someone like Waze? Community engagement. So I mentioned crowdsourcing early. If you're in a business, and I'm just going to diverge for a second, certain businesses have this concept called network effect. Okay, what's an example of a network effect? Well, Waze is a good one, because if I don't have a lot of drivers contributing data, which is basically covering a huge geographical area, when I go onto Waze, all I get is maps. I don't get any idea about the traffic or the time or detours or things like that. Another example of a type of business, a business model for another type of business that has something called a network effect, is what I call two-sided exchanges, meaning, and let's say a dating website is a two-sided exchange. And again, I'm just going to talk heterosexually for the moment. I need a certain need a certain amount of men and a certain amount of women for a dating website to work well in a heterosexual situation. All right. It's also, I need a certain amount of buyers and sellers. So eBay, by its very nature, is a two-sided exchange. I have stuff I want to sell. I need a fair amount of stuff up there to draw a lot of buyers. And that's what makes these things really work. So if you're dealing with that type of a website, and again, at the beginning, Waze, you have to get it going. It started in Israel. It started in an area. When they came to the US, here's an interesting little tidbit. When they came to the US and they were going in, they opened up regionally at first. They didn't open up to the whole country. And I believe one of the first areas they went to was Los Angeles, which of course, if anybody's driven in Los Angeles, has terrible traffic, okay? And they worked with the local radio stations and the local traffic reporters at the beginning to start to get people to know about Waze. Because again, it requires the network effect, a certain amount of crowd size to make it all work. So there's just a little tidbit of something. If you're in a type of business that you need to have a certain critical mass to make it work, think of creative ways to do it. Airbnb is another perfect example. I book, I have a spare bedroom or in my house I want to put up for sale. I need a certain number of houses and a certain number of people who want to rent houses to make all work. Airbnb started actually originally in San Francisco, and they started by renting their spare bedroom. The founders lived in a place where they had an extra room and they didn't have enough money during when the city had major conventions and hotel rooms were hard to get. And then they started looking at a place like Craigslist, which is an old site where it has lots of listings. And frankly, they stole some from there at the beginning to populate their site. So again, certain websites need a certain amount of critical mass or network effect. More people draw more people into it. It's kind of an interesting strategy. So sorry for a little diversion. Key activities. So what do companies have to do to make their business work? So again, in Waze, you got a platform and a network. These don't all apply to Waze, by the way, this slide. You need, depending on the type of business, if you're a wholesale distributor, you need a lot of potential customers. Because if I'm driving my trucks, again, to certain areas, I want to make sure I have enough. I don't send my truck out there to just solve on order, that's not terribly efficient. So if I can create more client base in a particular geography, I can serve that one more efficiently and more cost effective. So key activities. R&D on their software is important for Waze. They curate data and they maintain the Wazer community. And again, advertisers, again, is not super dominant in Waze, but you'll see if you really start looking at the app, you'll see different ads. If you're near a Dunkin' Donuts or a Shell gas station or other places like that, there are opportunities for roadside because it's perfect. I'm on the highway. I'm going to get off an exit. I want to eat lunch or I need gas. It's a perfect advertising mechanism. It's targeted advertising precisely to someone who's in that area who may be looking for something to eat or get gas or do other things like that. So ultimately, the partners that you have, the suppliers that you have, what do you need from each of these different groups? What do you need from key partners to make this thing work? Okay, so for example, Waze, one of Waze's key partner is Google because they own the company and they get certain technical and infrastructure things from Google. Municipalities, by the way, cities and towns love Waze, and they give Waze some mapping data on new streets that are being put in, and Waze gives them aggregated data versus specific data. So Waze generally try to protect your privacy. They'll give them giant things by talking about how many people are using what roads and what streets. In some communities, Waze has had a problem because if you've been on a major highway and there's a traffic jam, Waze will tell you to get off this exit and go down this back street and that back street. A lot of people who live on those streets are not happy about that because suddenly their streets, which are quiet residential roads, become busy. It's been an issue in some parts of the country where Waze has had to deal with pushback from the community on that. But in general, you as the driver, if you can bypass an accident on the highway and come up an exit or two later and bypass that accident, you're happy about that. But like for everything in life, for one thing, there's sometimes a positive, there's sometimes a negative. So again, all of these activities are key. You need to know what you need from each of these partners. Strategic alliances from key partners are important. So like I mentioned, municipalities and Waze have strategic partners. Each one benefits from it. Broadcasters in certain areas have tied into the Waze network. You need to figure out what pieces you need and where you can get them. So as I mentioned, advertisers, gas chains, community leaders, all a piece of what makes Waze successful. So what are we worried about your key suppliers and what resources do you need? So for resources, for instance, Waze needs software, and their whole it's obviously an app-based platform. They need good engineers, and what's underlying all that software is something called an algorithm, which allows Waze, because if you notice when you put Waze in, there's one point before you go where you can look at alternative routes. So the software basically you're going from point A to point B, and maybe you don't want to go on the main highway. Maybe you want to go on more scenic roads. So that's all driven by a type of software called an algorithm, which makes these calculations based on you want to go from point A to point B, but you have certain other parameters that you want to use, like maybe I don't want to go on a toll road, or maybe I don't want to go on a toll road. Exactly. So an algorithm is a critical resource. The algorithms that do this for Waze. and their IT infrastructure, which allows all of this thing to work well. So the other interesting thing about Waze is, I don't know if anybody knows that, if, for instance, if you're driving in downtown Boston through the tunnels, your cell phone is dependent on getting information through the air, through cell service. Waze has put in beacons and mechanisms in many of the big city tunnels, which allow them to get the information. So you can, even when you're potentially not within cell phone range, Waze has certain beacons in certain cities in tunnels that allow you to do that. And they place them in there, again, for the convenience of drivers and the DPW, or the municipal departments of highways. It's an added benefit for them. Again, strategic partnerships, strategic relationships on that. So ultimately, all of these, the value proposition, what does the value proposition require? You need your distribution channels. All of these things kind of tie together, all the 9 blocks tie together ultimately to make a good business model, a good functioning business, all right? So financial, many companies are different. So some companies need more financial resources. So for instance, if you're in a distribution business, I have to have a fair variety of items in my warehouse for me to be successful to deliver to hardware stores. So let's talk about Ace or True Value, or Ace is the biggest one. So Ace, you're a hardware store, and you're usually either a franchise or an independent owned Ace operation. You belong to Ace and you pay them money every year to use their brand, but they do bulk buying for you, okay? So they'll buy, because you as one small hardware store in, you know, a little town out in, I don't know, New Jersey, in the rural New Jersey area, and there are rural parts of New Jersey, you don't have great buying power. So Ace allows you to do that. So Ace happens to have a big warehouses, which they tend to supply their hardware stores for certain items. There's a certain amount of financial resources that are tied up in that inventory. Okay, the other thing is physical. Again, certain businesses need physical outlets. Certain industries are very dependent upon people. In the restaurant, I mean, obviously COVID did a number on the restaurants. Even where I live on Cape Cod, a lot of restaurants are not open on Sunday and Monday still. They don't have enough physical, they don't have enough help, human help, because they've had a struggle to get that, okay? And again, there are certain industries like Waze, software engineering, medical, where you either need scientists, software engineers with very specific talents. Okay, so these are must-have resources. So one of the things you need to look at is, what are the must-have resources for the type of business you're thinking about? And everything's different depending on the type of industry you're in. So in general, this is kind of a reasonable summary of, you know, the 4 basic types: human, financial, physical, intelligence, intellectual, I should say, of the types of things you need to make a business successful. And again, you need to sit there and say to yourself, okay, in my business idea, you know, what are the key pieces that I absolutely need to have? So that's, again, software, algorithms, developers, maps, infrastructure. And again, the last one is an interesting one, mindshare, because when you are getting in your car and you're worried about traffic, what app do you go to? Waze generally is very popular and has significant mind share. And mind share means basically, what does the customer, when they walk in there, they get in their car, start the engine, do they put their phone on or not, as a matter of course? And if so, what app are they going to go to use? Mind share is basically created over time, publicity, social media. You know, basically people know about Waze. So if you were trying to start up a competitor Waze, that's a real obstacle to you getting into business. It's very interesting. I just saw an ad on TV recently for something called DuckDuckGo, which I don't know if any of you know of. It is a web browser. Of course, most of us use Apple's
Safari.
proprietary Safari. Thank you. I'm not an Apple user. Thanks, Jim. Safari, you're going to use Chrome. You're going to use Microsoft. I think Edge is the current one that they're using. And this is a company called DuckDuckGo. And what's their selling proposition? What they like to believe is their value proposition is they protect you from companies with cookies. They protect your privacy. Because if you know everywhere you go on the web, basically, and that's how Google makes its money, they know that you were there. And therefore, you will get ads served up to you that are very in line with the things that you were Googling or looking for. DuckDuckGo is a company that basically says, we're going to protect your privacy. I actually don't know how they make money completely, but I just saw an ad for that the other day, which made me think about it, because their value prop to clients is, we're going to protect your privacy. So the rest of the model, I'm not quite sure how it fills up because I haven't done enough reading about it. But there's an example of, things like that. There's different competitors and they've been around for a while. So obviously there's enough people out there who are concerned about their privacy on today's web that they're surviving out there. And how can they grow? We'll see.
Hey, Mark, let me throw a few questions at you.
Sure.
And while you're answering them, maybe you could go back to the first key resources slides. Somebody asked to be able to see that again for a second.
Let's see.
It's that box of human, physical, blood, intellectual.
Yeah, you know what? I'm on a system where I'm going to have to get out for a second and go back.
Oh, don't do that.
Okay, fine. Because I'm
Lauren,
not on my regular computer here.
No, that's fine, Lauren. You can see that when you look at the recording for the session, which you will get a link to. Two other questions, though, Mark. One is from Leona. Can you provide any good resources that give sample marketing plans or strategies?
Well, okay, so that's a big question. So if I were you, Leona, depending on the type of business you're in, so I'm going to go off base a little bit. Everybody uses Google, I'm assuming. Not everybody knows anything about something called Google Advanced Search, I'm assuming. So those of you who are sitting out there right now, if that doesn't make sense to you, what I just said, Google Advanced Search, which looks, by the way, very different on your screen than when you just go to Google. So I'm going to tell you a trick that I've used for years, and if you get good at it, it's really great at finding information that you're looking for, like Leona's looking for marketing plans for certain type of businesses. Google Advanced, because I believe I have enough time here to divert for a second. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Advanced Search. And what you're going to see is, opposed to Google, which has one line where you type in your inquiry, Google Advanced Search has 5 boxes up at the top and a bunch of other filters, I call them, on the second half of the page. If you can probably Google Advanced Search tutorial and find advice on how to use this tool. It is a super powerful tool if you're doing business research or looking for business marketing plans for a certain type of industry. Because the problem that happens with Google is, unless you really know how to use it well, you type in stuff and a lot of it is not on point. So to Leona's question, if I want marketing plans, if I type in marketing plans, I'm going to be inundated with tons of different examples. But I only want marketing plans for, and again, I don't know what business you're in, Leona, but maybe I'm going to start a salon or something. Okay. Using Google Advanced Search, you can dive down and get much more specific data so you won't get as much junk, let's say, that comes up in your searches. All right. And there's a couple of key things I'll tell you about, and probably we could do a webinar on this someday. Okay. But in the 5 boxes, one of the box is, I believe it's the third one down, doing this from memory, which is exact word. So in Google, you can put quotations. When you type in 2 words into Google, Google is basically going to find the page with those 2 words anywhere on the page. Could be the first word and the last word. But what you want is the 2 words together, because the 2 words together is really the descriptive thing of which you're looking for. So in Google, you can put quotation marks around 2 words, and that'll tell Google, I only want you to find pages where those 2 words are together. Advanced search has these options in it, which allows you to do all this very detailed filtering of what you're asking Google to come up with. And I guarantee you, if you learn to use that properly, you will be much more efficient in finding the information you're looking for. One last thing on that before I move on, because that's not the point of this webinar today, is in the pieces, in the second set of boxes in Google Advanced Search, which is the bottom half of the page, there are all these other filters that allow you to filter by file format. So for instance, if I'm trying to figure out how to do a spreadsheet on cash flow, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. Look, we were all taught in school not to plagiarize, and I'm not saying you should plagiarize and claim something's your own, but there's a lot of stuff out there that's already been, somebody came up with it, that you could use as a basis to tweak and fix to suit your own problems. So in file formats, one of the file format is Excel spreadsheets, PDF documents, Word documents. So if you're trying to write a letter or a small contract, you may be able to use and get Google Advanced Search, type in the key parameters of what you want, and then put the filter on either PDF or Microsoft Word doc files. And I guarantee you, you'll find something that will be close, better than what you would have found doing it the normal way. Okay. And again, a whole bunch of other tricks, which I don't have time to discuss, but if you want one takeaway tidbit from today's session, learn a little bit about Google Advanced Search when you're trying to find things you can't find easily using regular Google. All right. Anyways, revenue streams and its cost structures. So ultimately, business is all about making money. There are old jokes about, you know, I lose a little money on each one I sell and I make it up in volume. Well, that's a fast way to go bankrupt. So the 7 of the boxes are about, you know, customer segments, resources, activities, things like that. The last 2 boxes are about money, cost, and revenue. All right, because ultimately it's what money is coming in, and if you're from an accounting point of view, it's more of a gross revenue. I'm getting money coming in, and what are my costs? How much does it cost me to make this device? Or how much does it cost me to deliver the services? What's my rent and overhead? What's my insurance and all these other expenses? So ultimately, the last 2 boxes are still come down to money in and money out. And obviously in business, we want to have at the end of that little transaction, we want what's left is profit. And that's what we really care about. And particularly if you're going to take your business plan to the bank, who's sponsoring the webinar today, they want to make sure you can make enough money in your business so you can pay back the loan. Because that's what they're in business to do, is loan money to you to help you grow your business. They charge interest, and then you pay them the interest, and they're happy because they've made money, and they're happy because they've helped create a business in their community, in the area. So those are the key things. So ultimately, money in and money out. And so where does, how do you earn revenue? And again, there are a lot of businesses where people don't, it costs money to acquire customers. Cell phone companies have a metric, you know, average revenue per user, because not only do they want to get you to sign up, but they want to sell you extra services. Cable streaming services are perfect examples. You know, once you get a customer, what other products or related things can I sell to? Or if you're a service company, if you're a plumber or you're an HVAC company, you came out to my house to basically service my air conditioner because it wasn't working. Well, you should send that customer a postcard once a year, twice a year, once a year or every other year, whatever, reminding them that it's time for them to have their air conditioner serviced. You would be amazed at simple marketing techniques like that, how much revenue you can start to generate beyond people just calling you when it's broken and it doesn't work. So there are all these techniques because those are what I call annuity revenue streams. When I go to the dentist generally will schedule my next appointment for me. That's yes, they're doing it because they want to make sure I don't get plaque on my teeth and all that, but they're doing it because it fills their schedule. So again, if you're in a service-based business where there's repetitive kind of things, always ask the customer before they leave, do you want to schedule your next appointment now? All right, it's easy. If I'm an HVAC guy, send me a postcard to remind me that it's time for me to service my air conditioner. These are little things that are, again, not in the business model canvas, but these are the things that a good score mentor can help you grow, not only if you're, help you increase your revenue in your business, okay? So revenue streams are, again, there's a lot of different ways, pricing, fees, subscriptions, things like that. So how does Waze make money? Basically by advertising. Google and Waze are all by this mechanism called pay per impression. In the business, it's called CPI, and the I is impressions, but you want to, again, how many times do you see the ad? Because marketing by its very nature is repetitive. You don't usually run one ad. People run ads on a repetitive basis. We all know the little gecko in Geico. And why do we know that? Because if you watch TV, you see the ad on a regular basis, or little songs that certain commercials have little songs that people will catch in your brain. Advertising is a repetitive thing. Waze makes their money by doing advertising. And again, because they live in the whole Google universe, which is based on, you don't pay that much for Google. I mean, maybe you pay some money to have extra storage on one of their servers. But in general, Google's their whole business model is based on, they provide free services. They get data because they know where you've gone. They sell that data in an aggregated form, not necessarily showing you particularly, to advertisers. And then that helps feed their model for providing more services, which is why they actually bought Waze from the Israeli founders. I think it was 2007 or something like that, a while ago, when it was a relative. They paid $1 billion for that company, a little over $1 billion, which I'm sure is generating way more than what they paid at the time. But they were smart and they got in early. So on the revenue side is, where's the money coming from? Whoops, and I went through, sorry about that, guys. Because the slide was competition. I'm going to just talk about it. As I think Lawrence said it, or somebody's asked me the question originally, competition. Again, look at who your competition is from. It may not be direct head on. So there are substitutes. One of the things you need to think about is competition is substitutes. So a simple example of that is, if you drink coffee, you may put sugar in your coffee. That's fine. So, but who are my competitors if I'm a sugar manufacturer? I grow sugar. But my competitors are not just other sugar, brown sugar or granular sugar, all the different types of sugar out there. My others are the pink, blue, stevia, all the different sugar substitutes out there. Those are competitors of mine. They may not be a direct head-on competitor because they're not actually sugar. They're a chemical compound, but they're still a competitor. So after you fill out the canvas, you're still looking at the, who are my Where do I fit in a competitive landscape? You don't have to be the cheapest game in town. Apple has made their business on selling premium products to people. Android phones are generally, you can always, there's high quality, expensive Android phones like Google Pixel and Samsung, but there's also a lot of Android phones that are less expensive. Google's never played that game. Yes, they have some range of products. They've always aimed at the premium price world because they're selling more than a phone. They're selling an image. They're selling a user design interface. They're selling kind of, a certain feel and look. Okay. So you don't always have to be the cheapest person to be successful. And in fact, sometimes in some marketplaces, being the cheapest, doesn't do you a good long-term strategy. Because when customers go into a store, for instance, if I'm going into a grocery store and I'm looking at 3 or 4 different products, and some are priced higher and some are priced low. I mean, there's been a lot of studies done. Certain people will always buy the cheapest thing because money is driving their buying decision. But for a lot of people in the middle, they're afraid, especially if they don't know the products, they'll tend to buy the middle one because they feel safer by buying the middle one. So there's a lot of consumer buying behavior studies and research that's gone on. So you don't always have to be the cheapest game. What you have to give them is good value. Again, back to the value proposition. I don't mind spending more money for certain things because I'm either going to get a better quality product that's going to last me longer, or I'm going to get really good service. Okay. So again, there's a lot of stuff goes into value. And again, we use the term value proposition. Why is the customer buying this from you? But again, value is a very interesting concept that different people look at differently. If you're trying to really pinch pennies on a limited income, that's fine. I'll go cheap. But again, a lot of people, it doesn't pay for the long run. My mother used to have this little expression, buy cheap and weep. Okay, meaning sometimes you buy a cheap product and you'll use it once or twice and won't work well, etc. So I think I'm pretty much at the end of my slides, and I know it's just about 1 o'clock. So
we had a couple of other questions, Mark.
I'm happy to stay if anybody wants to stay.
One question from Jonan is, when do you know it's time to update your business plan?
So I would tell you you may not update your whole business plan. If you're already in business, I doubt that you have to update the whole plan. You may have to update the marketing or sales. So essentially, you want to have an honest periodic review. And by the way, this is a good thing to do with a SCORE mentor if you build a relationship with them. So I would tell you once a year, maybe quarterly, depending on how fast things are changing, you want to sit down and basically said, what did we say we were going to do this year? And how did we do? And if we didn't do what we said we were going to do, meaning our numbers were not as good as we expected, why? What happened? The key for the business plan is it's not a static document. You should use it as a tool that's constantly evolving along with your business. You should sit down and even once you make a business plan, you should still have some annual goals or programs that you want to put in. And if you don't get it to work, doesn't mean it was a bad idea. It may have been A, the wrong timing, or B, we didn't implement it right. So I would say to you that you should look minimally once a year at, pieces of your business and therefore your plan, and not necessarily just your business plan, but your marketing plan or your sales plan, and probably more likely quarterly, depending on the size of your business and how fast things are moving for you. Hopefully that answers your question. Jim, others?
And I just want to interject real quick. Just as a reminder, we do have Johnny and Debbie from East Cambridge Savings Bank. If anyone wants to ask a question about business plans relating to the bank, we would like to get those answered as well. You can either put those questions in Q&A, or you can actually use the raised hand icon, and we will unmute you so you can get your question asked. Thank you.
We did have one other question from the audience before that, Mark, which was from Dr. Sandy Range. How do you apply these concepts to nonprofits? In his example, he's providing or building intentional community homes, but I think it's nonprofits generally.
Yeah, so actually, nonprofits are, in a lot of ways, much more complicated than for-profit businesses. Because if you were trying to apply a business model, there is a specific business model canvas out there that you may be able to Google and find that is set up for nonprofits. I suggest that you look for that, because nonprofits have multiple customer segments, just to take a quick whack at this. It's not only the beneficiary of my mission, my nonprofit, it would be my donors, like the bank and the bank foundations. Okay. It would be my volunteers or a customer segment. So nonprofits are actually much more complicated to run than for-profit businesses. And I suggest that you do a little research out there. There is a nonprofit business model canvas, not by the authors of the book, but stuff that other people have put out there. And that, frankly, I'd be happy, reach out to, I'd be happy. I do a lot of nonprofit work myself. So don't hesitate to reach out to Cape Cod SCORE or any other SCORE chapter out there. But let me ask a question just for the bank who's sponsoring this event. Oh, okay, how's that? So if I'm, and I'm going to speak for maybe some of the people on the call here today. I come to you and I have an idea for a business. What are the key things that you're looking for to you use an evaluation on whether you're going to give me a loan or not?
Well, one thing, Mark, you probably know, it's really hard for banks to lend to startups unless somebody has a collateral in the form of real estate that the bank can use to secure. But so the first thing we're going to ask for are personal tax returns. All small business loans, we would require 100% guaranteed by any owner that has 20% or more. So we'll look carefully at the person's personal financial profile and condition. And then, yes, we would ask for a business plan. We would ask for pro forma financials for the first, depending on the business, 2 to 5 years. And have a conversation about how they plan to grow the business and any other, there could potentially be, actually sometimes there's a lot of other information that falls out of the financials they provide us and the two major things, the business plan and the projections.
Right. So I did know that, obviously, because I deal with our local banks, but I was just trying to get the question out there. So for those on the call, to be honest, startups, if you have a startup, most banks won't loan to you. And even the SBA, which I'm assuming that, Debbie, you deal with the SBA loans, correct? And one of the reasons an SBA loan is good for most small business owners is the SBA takes some of the risk off the bank. Okay. And that allows the bank, if they were like, had some questions about, whether they should loan you all that money, the SBA covers a certain percentage of the loan. So now the bank feels better about making the loan because they don't have all that money at risk. Okay. So by the way, you should all go to if you're talking to a banker or the SBA, it's a real totally important mechanism for certain people to allow them to actually get going. Would you agree, Debbie?
Yes, I would. Right.
So again, if you're doing a complete startup and you don't have a history or experience in the business, it's tough to raise money. I don't want to be a bearer of bad news, but reality is reality out there.
Yeah, and so we tell people, friends and family are a place to often start with the initial financing. And then there are some alternative lenders. Actually, SCORE did a program where they introduced a bunch of alternative lenders, some of whom I'd never heard of before. Maybe Teresa can refer people to that.
Sure. Yeah. So on Cape Cod, where I live, there isn't a coastal community capital. There are CD, community developed financial, and they will make some small loans to people with, in touchier situations that, but again, if you're startup business owners, what you need to really think about is how do I keep my capital outlays to as small as possible? Because then you may be able to get family and friends, scrape the money up together and bootstrap this thing. It is, if you're in a business, if you decide you want to start an airplane company and make commercial jets, you got a tough road to hoe, because I don't know how many billions of dollars and very specific talent and FAA certifications. Though that's another concept called barrier to entry. So certain industries require a lot of money and a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills that you have to have before you can even get in. Okay, so give a real, and again, the Canvas does this, but it doesn't have all these questions. Seriously think about the type of business you're thinking about and what is absolutely required to get it up and running versus what you may be able to add on in a year or two after you get some money going. I mean, banks love to, and I don't say this in a negative way, banks love to loan money to people who they're sure can pay the money back.
Exactly.
Because that's your business and you have shareholders, or if you're a mutual, I don't know, are you a mutual bank?
We are mutual.
Yeah, so they have people who they have to take care of their shareholders. And they have to make sure that they can get the majority of their loans paid back.
We really don't like to make bad loans that we're not going to be able to collect on. And everything you said is absolutely correct. So once you're an established business, and it's a C&I loan, a commercial and industrial loan, the focus is on the cash flows of the business and the ability to cover debt service at more, at a ratio we 1.2 times or 1.3 times. So,
And I'm going to step in here real quick. What Debbie's referring to is the financing a business webinar, and we will be giving that on February 9th. So you can actually go to the SCORE Boston website and see the listing for that and register for that. And we will go into all of those different financing options through the bank, through some other non-traditional methods that you may not have thought of. We definitely are a little bit over today, and we're going to need to wrap this up. And I just want to thank Mark. That was fantastic presentation. You just provided just a tremendous amount of information. Reminder to everyone still in attendance to look for that email with the recording and some of the other links that we'll be providing you. And thanks to Debbie and Johnny for being a sponsor on this event. And definitely watch for the next, which is cash flow, and then February 9th, which is the financing of a business. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Good luck.
Yes.
Call us SCORE Mentor.